Chapter 1. The clock had to be broken. Schuyler had probably looked at the black, bold-faced letters of that wall clock 15 times in as many minutes, but it felt more like 15 hours. Letting out a beleaguered sigh, she hopped off the stool behind the counter, littered with various scented body gels, and decided that maybe if she got off her ass and did something, 5 o'clock would come faster. Sundays at Stiletto's lingerie shop were usually slow, but this was ridiculous. If she didn't move around, she was going to fall asleep face first into the basket of garter belts on the counter. Weekdays usually went by quickly, and she hated to admit that it was because her entire day revolved around getting a glimpse of Mr. Wall Street. In fact, spotting him when he sauntered by the window had turned into a private game. Every day he would wander past on his way to and from the little sandwich shop at the end of the strip mall, and catching sight of him was usually the highlight of Schuyler's day. Every now and then he'd catch her eye and flash her a lopsided grin, which was both mortifying and awesome. A smile played at her lips when his tall, well-groomed image came to mind. Schuyler had no idea what his name was, and she didn't really want to know because a guy like that never went for girls like her. Mr. Wall Street probably banged Ralph Lauren-wearing blondes 2 at a time, or expensive call girls by the droves. A perfectly pressed guy like that didn't diddle with girls like Schuyler. Nope. Sadly, she would have to remain satisfied with the glimpses she got of him. Thank God for that damn sandwich shop and for the new office building that had opened next to the strip mall. Prior to the construction of that place, their little mall was in danger of going under, and as much as she hated to admit it, Schuyler needed this job. Working at Stiletto's started as something she could do part-time while taking classes at the local college. Before she knew it, part-time turned into full-time, and 3 years had gone by. Full-time retail work barely paid the bills, but at least the bills were paid. Schuyler told herself that the job at Stiletto's was really more of an internship because she did much more than cover the register. She did the books, ordered merchandise, and managed the 3 other girls who worked there part-time. It was all part of the bigger picture. Someday, she'd have her own shop, but it wouldn't be lingerie and sex toys. Schuyler wanted to have her own jewelry store, and not just any store. Her vision was to have a place where customers could design their own jewelry or purchase her custom designs. Schuyler was determined that someday she'd have her own place and maybe even her own Mr. Wall Street. Actually, she thought on a sigh, he'd probably be more like Mr. Main Street. But romance was the last item on her to-do list. Only a few credits away from completing her undergrad degree in business, she was determined to make her dreams a reality. She stretched her arms over her head and yawned as she scooted out from behind the counter that was shaped like a giant red stiletto. She had been up all night talking her roommate Jessica off the ledge after her boyfriend cheated on her again. Schuyler let out a sound of disgust, thinking about how often Jessica's boyfriend seemed to screw up. The guy was unable to keep his dick in his pants, and no matter how many times he fooled around, Jessica always took him back. "It's just not worth it," Schuyler muttered, while kneading the assorted lingerie along the far wall. "Hey!" Franco snapped. He emerged from his office and placed a box on the counter. "What are you bitching about, missy?" "Nothing, Franco," Schuyler laughed. She glanced over her shoulder at her boss and couldn't help but smile. With a shock of jet black hair, gold chains, and thick New York accent, the man looked and sounded more like a mafia loan shark than a lingerie store owner. He'd inherited the place from his mother Gladys, and though he always talked about selling it, Schuyler doubted he ever would. Why sell? He not only owned the store, but the entire strip mall it was located in. "It ain't nothing if you're talking to yourself about it," he said, handing her a price gun and a box of panties. "Here, price this batch and put 'em over there with the rest of the crotchless undies." "Happy to." Schuyler flicked a glance out the window at the shoppers who walked by, but didn't come in. "What are you doing here anyway? You know how dead it is in here on Sundays. Weren't you just saying that you shouldn't even bother opening on Sundays?" "None of that talk, girlie." He waved one ring hand at her dismissively. "Making some money is better than making no money." "Right, but aren't you supposed to be home today?" Schuyler swore as the edge of a tag sliced her finger, giving her a paper cut. She grimaced and sucked on the tip before shaking her hand vigorously. "Didn't you just tell me that you were going to take your Aunt Madeline to church so she can pray for you in your sinful shop?" "Yeah, well, she had a big bingo game today at the assisted living place, so I took her to church last night instead." Franco checked his hair in the gilded mirror behind the register and winked at her, which only made Schuyler roll her eyes. His overt flirting was more comical than anything else, especially since Schuyler wasn't his type. Now, back to you. Tell me, what were you mumbling about when I came in? What ain't worth it? Love and sex. Bite your tongue! Franco spun around and leaned both ring-studded hands on the glass counter that covered the giant red stiletto. We make our living because of love and sex. Schuyler arched one eyebrow at him and gave him a doubtful look. Okay, fine, he sighed dramatically. Sex. We make our living because of sex. So you keep that blasphemous talk to yourself. If our customers ever knew how long it had been since you got laid, oof, it'd be bad for business. Hardly. Schuyler nodded toward the wall of vibrators along the back, making long strands of brown hair fall over her face. Thanks to modern conveniences and some batteries, I don't need another person for sexual gratification. I can handle it all by myself, which is far less complicated than dealing with a man. Sure, Franco let out a curt laugh, but it's a hell of a lot more fun with a partner or two. And don't tell me there's no one who interests you, because that's some bullshit. You've been drooling over that suit from next door for months now. If you ask me, you're a big old chicken. If you had any balls at all, you'd go to lunch at the deli when he's there. But instead, you hide here amid the undies and the dildos. You're too much, Schuyler said as she finished pricing the box of underwear. Tightening her ponytail, she tucked the stray hair behind her ear and went to the back room to collect some hangers. A guy like him is probably married with 2.5 kids. Besides, I don't want a boyfriend or a relationship. Well, since you haven't had a serious boyfriend for like the past 3 years, that's stating the obvious, and I still say you chicken, Franco shouted after her. Tomorrow, when your eye candy walks by, you should follow him down to the deli and strike up a conversation. It's not healthy for a pretty young woman like you to be celibate and spend too much time alone. Sex is an important part of life, and you're missing out. Schuyler dragged a box of hangers off a shelf in the stockroom, which promptly sprinkled dust all over her. Brushing off her black top and skinny jeans, she made a face. The last complication Schuyler wanted in her life was a man. Men don't stay. Her father left, and watching her mother die a little bit every day after that was torture. Schuyler's boyfriend, the one who swore he would never leave her, eventually left, and that heartbreak almost killed her. She spent the better part of the next 6 months with her face stuck in a Ben & Jerry's container. Love and intimacy weren't worth the high cost of suffering that ultimately ensued. Whatever, Franco. You know I don't believe in the fairy tale of a happily ever after, Schuyler shouted. She hoisted the box of hangers onto her hip and closed the stockroom door behind her. Better to be celibate and avoid a broken heart. A man and his penis aren't worth the trouble. With a little help from my vibrator and a vivid fantasy life, I'll get myself off. Thank you very much. I am responsible for my own orgasms. The words having barely escaped her lips, Schuyler rounded the corner into the store and came face to face with Mr. Wall Street. Dressed in faded Levi's, motorcycle boots, and black t-shirt with a pair of Ray-Bans tucked in the collar, he looked more like a biker than a banker. His dark hair was windblown, not slicked back like it was for work, and the shadow of a beard covered his strong jaw. The man was sexy as hell, no matter what he wore, and he just heard everything she said. Well, where's the fun in that? He asked, giving her that same sexy, lopsided grin she'd seen outside the window. Pale green eyes, rimmed with thick, dark lashes, smiled at her mischievously. Why not have your cake and eat it too? What? Schuyler stopped dead in her tracks, the box of hangers on her hip and a look of pure mortification on her face. I'm sorry. Can I help you? His smile widened, and just when she thought she would die of embarrassment, Franco came over and grabbed the box from her. I'll take that, Franco said quickly. He scooted behind her and nudged her toward Mr. Wall Street. Schuyler, keep an eye in the store. I gotta take care of something in the back. I'm sorry. Schuyler tucked her hair behind her ear and immediately went behind the counter, seeking to put some distance between herself and the long drooled-over object of her affection. She'd never been so embarrassed in all her life and could not believe that the first time she meets him, she is babbling about masturbation. Placing her hands on the smooth glass surface, she forced herself to look him in the eyes. A swarm of butterflies swirled in her stomach, and she tried not to pay attention to her racing heart. Jesus, she hadn't been this sweaty palm nervous since Bob Gerard sat behind her in 8th grade study hall.